So welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. Good morning. Great to see some familiar names and faces joining us today. We are here um, to engage in our fall learning series session, Language Justice, the Path to Engaging Communities. And we're joined by Amer Fayadh, who is the CEO of Communications Essentials LLC in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And he is here to chat with us about his work and his efforts to bring language justice to schools and communities. And so, Amer, I'll pass it over to you. Thank you all again for being here, and let's get started.
Thank you, Megan. I appreciate everyone, and good morning, everyone. I'm going to start with sharing my screen. So let me see if I can advance my slide. And thank you very much, everyone. It's a pleasure being with you here today. Of course, as Megan mentioned, this is going to be a conversation, and I look forward to having this conversation with you today. We definitely learn from each other and learn from each other's experiences. And I wanted to start with the statement that I heard from one of my clients when we asked the clients to go out into the community and take pictures of their successes and their challenges. And he came back with this statement, not a witch doctor. And I wanted to explain to you the story behind it. When he first arrived to the United States, he was, of course, resettled by the agency that I worked for. And he was placed in an apartment across the street from a tattoo shop. The tattoo shop, as you see on the screen, had a skull, had the wings, and had, images related to the work, the artistic work that the tattoo shop is doing. However, the client saw it as a witch doctor. And he said, in my culture, we stay away from witch doctors. And when I first was resettled and I woke up in the morning, I was faced with the reality that I'm living across the street from a witch doctor. Of course, I started reflecting on the experience that I had with that client 6 months prior to learning a cultural nuance that he had to deal with and struggle through in the beginning of his resettlement. And I reflected also on my experience dealing with his objection to staying at that apartment at that time and wanting to leave and wanting to be placed in a different apartment. Of course, his request initially was not granted because we had that different in communication style. He wanted to leave, but he did not explain why he wants to leave. And also at the same time, I, as the case manager that worked with him at that time, was a little bit frustrated with the fact that we provided him with a safe, clean apartment, but he wants to leave and go somewhere else. So language justice is more than just interpretation or translation. It's about creating equitable access to communication and decision making. It's also about taking in consideration lived cultural experiences, because those experiences matter and those experiences influence the decision making of the people that we are engaging today. By opening the spaces for inclusive communication, by allowing ourselves to learn from others and allow others to learn from us, it will only empower us to deliver the best services out there for our clients and for the people that we work with. So I thank you for being here today. The topic of language justice can be new to some people, but also is an integral part of the work that we do every day. I will try to my best to keep with time, and I promise, to do that today. But I'm available for you if you need me, if you have any questions throughout the session. Megan will be keeping track of questions. Feel free to post them into the chat, and we will try to answer as many questions. But if we don't get to answer all of those questions, feel free to reach out to me after the session, and I will be more than happy to assist you, more than happy to answer those questions or discuss them with you in any way possible. My name is Amer Fayadh. As Megan mentioned, I work for a company called Communication Essential. We provide language justice consultancy, and I will explain a little bit more about what language justice mean in a little bit. We also provide professional development opportunities along with translations and interpretation services. I resettled in the United States in 2010, and I worked in refugee and immigrant services for almost 10 years prior to starting my own business, Communication Essentials. And the business I started as an interpretation and translation services, but I realized quickly that there is more than just translation and interpretation. There is the cultural component that we need to keep in mind. There are also the internal capacity building that we need to keep in mind in order for us to serve the families and the individuals, the students and the individuals that we work with. So we will start with posing a question. And the question is, what is language justice? Because we start talking about language justice, and people might not know or might not be familiar with the term. And language justice refers to the concept that all individuals, regardless of their English language ability or the language that they speak, should and could have access and equal access, to be precise, to information, services, opportunities, and also it involves recognizing power dynamics and inequalities that arise from language differences. To give you an example about that, I grew up in Iraq, in the Middle East. I came to the United States, and I was faced by a system that is different than the system that I'm accustomed to. Back home, either the services are provided by the government, and everybody represent the government. And of course, the way that you interact with the government is you're there to serve the government, and the government is not there to serve you as a citizen of that country. So the interaction was a kind of top-down approach, and you have to show appreciation. You have to show thanks to all of the services that are, or the lack of the services that, or the services that are not being provided for you, and you have to agree, and you have to show no objection to the government or any comments that will be seen as an objection or dissatisfaction with the government services. And of course, you have the private sector. So when coming to the United States and seeing that services are provided potentially by nonprofits, local governments, provided by independent entities like school districts, etc., it creates sometimes confusion on, okay, who are these people that I'm dealing with? Do they represent the government? How can I share my thoughts with them? And if I share my thoughts, will I be punished or would I be excluded from services, etc., etc.? And those sometimes hinder the decision making of the client that we're working with. Also, language justice is about creating that inclusive environment where everyone, regardless of their language, can thrive and have their needs met. Of course, to give examples about that, access to technology or understanding of technology, being able to access services without linguistic or technological barriers or any other barriers that could stand in the way of the clients that we are serving. And one of the key components to that is creating, of course, a feedback mechanism between us and the clients that we're serving to make sure that their feedback, that their opinion, that their thoughts are incorporated in a way that will streamline the process and allow for services to be accessible and more accessible than what they are. And as we dive deeper, deeper in this conversation, I wanted to take some moments in the beginning to speak about some of the terms that potentially we will be encountering as we are having this talk today. Interpretation, of course, refers to verbal communication, what we are interpreting from one language to another verbally. Translation, and sometimes it's used interchangeably with interpretation, but translation here in our context refers to written communication from source language to another language. Meaningful access is what we just recently discussed about giving the ability for people to access our services and in a way that preserve their dignity and also in a way that will allow them timely access in a meaningful way without any barriers that could stand in their way on accessing those services. As for vital resources, whether those are applications, whether those are, you know, online resources, whether that those, marketing materials or outreach materials or any other materials that potentially allow the client to access the services in a timely manner, and without them, they could lose access or could limit their ability to benefit from the program or the services that are offered to them. Next, of course, I worked with many organizations before, and one of the questions that come to mind, when I reflect on those experiences as I worked with some of those agencies, they will be talking about potentially how can we do that? How can we meet the needs of all clients? How can we be open to serving all clients as it requires additional resources, as it requires additional time, as it requires, uh, a lot of intentional work that we might not have the current capacity to be able to meet. And one of the things that I mentioned to them is looking and trying to recognize the opportunities that are available for us, in the work that we're doing. And to give you an example, of some of those opportunities, if you look at the United States community composition, you will see that, more than 21% of the individuals that live in the United States use languages other than English at home. Also, if we are, and I'm going to be using the school district of Lancaster as an example here in our town, we have more than 559 different languages spoken within the school system. And that's a huge number when you come to number of languages and the diversity of the school district of Lancaster. And of course, as that diversity present an opportunity, it also could be viewed as a challenge. But those opportunities, if we engage the community the right way, if we engage the community with a systematic approach to things, we could potentially, lead to enhance not only the community well-being, but also enhance the safety in our community, enhance the health of the community that we live in, and we could potentially identify, other funding opportunities or collaboration opportunities to meet needs that might not have been on our radar prior to that. But before I see, and of course, I feel like, I'm limited to seeing, the screen as I have the slides here in front of me, but I see that there were some potentially comments, or are there any comments, questions, Megan, in the chat before we move to the next slide?
No comments or questions, just everyone saying good morning, introducing themselves, and yeah, settling into the space.
Wonderful. Okay. I feel like I said a lot thus far. I feel that, that the concept can be new to some people. So I wanted to start with potentially at this moment to ask this question. What challenges have you observed? What challenge do you observe at this moment serving English learners in our community within your capacity or within the areas that you serve in? And answering those questions, of course, or answering this question will help us, you know, frame the conversation moving forward and allow us to touch on the areas of your interest. So feel free to take a few moments and also to think about the questions, think about the challenges so we can identify potential some of opportunities to serve our community better. And I'm going to be putting, some categories on the screen that can help potentially trigger some of your thoughts there. And of course, Megan, I will wait for you to share those comments or share those questions so we can respond to them as they come.
Absolutely. So Shonda wrote, I struggle with getting our district to send information home in the languages needed in my district. Someone said, oftentimes speaking a different language is viewed as a quote learning disability and treated along the lines of special education, transportation to work, and or with getting children to school with all of our remodeling. The family right to know, two-way communication in person and through communication tools and resources for families on how to help students at home. Getting teachers other than ELD specialists to communicate with multilingual families. And participants are dealing with trauma in the midst of trying to figure out life in the US and feeling overwhelmed.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And thank you so much. So to reflect on one of the earlier questions, and of course, we will do our best to answer as many questions as we can. But to reflect on some of those questions that you posed into the chat just now, I remember working with clients, and my clients will receive a lot of mail, and of course, a lot of them are not comfortable or used to receiving mail at all, in their home country. And when they receive the mail, I come to visit them, whether I'm a case manager that comes to visit potentially maybe once a week or, even a little bit longer as they are resettling and as they are engaged in the community more and more. They present me with a basket of mail, and we receive these letters throughout the week or the past 10 days, and we need to respond to them. And most of the times when I see the letters that they have either due dates or they have a request for information in order for them to qualify for a service, or in order for the school district, as example, to schedule a meeting or take an action on something that, let's say, field trip, or they need a parent's permission to that, or they need to schedule the child for a dental appointment, or they need to schedule the child for a vision screening, etc., etc. And I found out that, sometimes people even lose services throughout the process. So I look at it as lost and wasted resources and money because, if, as example, this family is working with an agency, unless they lost the services that they were qualified for or their application was denied, that will mean that that staff member that spent the time reviewing the application and sending that letter out and not receiving an answer and sending another letter denying the application, all of that, I view it as, again, lost resources and money. And sometimes agencies don't recognize that. They don't recognize that, and they consider it as part of the process. But with a little bit of course, adjustment, whether through translation or whether through direct communication with the families when they drop off the child, or any other ways that you could potentially get an answer from the family, could reduce the wasted and lost time and resources, within the agency. And this is not only uh, looking at it from like the community benefit component, which a great benefit when the people or the clients are able to access those services, but also from the district or the organization's benefit, where they will be reducing the time and the energy spent on each application when we see that the same the same challenges are presenting themselves over and over. Uh, Also, like, I think there was another question about transportation, and if you can repeat that question, Megan, please.
Yes, of course. Yes, everyone was just responding to your prompt. So the transportation to work and or getting children to school can be difficult, of course, for multilingual families.
Yeah, and we had a, I believe, like here in the city of Lancaster, we had an initiative where they had potentially volunteers, families within the districts that could help families navigate how to get to school and how to get to school safely. Because many of the families, if we reflect on their experiences, whether that they are coming from the camp or they are coming from like areas that they were potentially living in, uh, if they were, in a host country prior to coming to the United States, usually they were in situations that safety was not present. And a lot of families may fear, sending, especially like, in some situations, sending their daughters to school or sending their younger children due to kidnapping or other trauma that they had to deal with prior to coming to the United States. So one of the initiatives that we had here in our city is for volunteers or other families within the district to walk with the students or to walk alongside those families in the beginning to make sure that they can navigate the streets and also to make sure that they can get to school in a safe manner and be able to get their schools from and to school without having to deal with the added stress of navigating streets that they might be unfamiliar with, or areas that they might be unfamiliar with how to navigate, with the assumptions that okay, if I go out, or like if I try to take my kids to school or send them on their own, it might not be safe on those streets. Any other thematic questions that you could potentially share with us, Megan?
Yeah, of course. So there's a few more responses to your question about challenges. Jen wrote, when referring families to food pantries, jobs, community groups, I wonder how they are going to communicate their needs and access the support when the agency doesn't have interpretation services. Lisa wrote, education is a requirement in the US and some families do not send their children on a regular basis. Our school district supports our culturally and linguistically diverse families in many ways. The biggest challenge is to get families to be a school voice. Erica agreed that families having a voice is super important. Smita wrote, we continue to educate our general education teachers every month on strategies for belonging and removing barriers. And then, there is a question from Kelly. Are there still programs in Lancaster to help families get to school appointments?
Perfect, and thank you very much. So I remember, you know, I remember when my mom used to take us to school on the first day of school. And again, like, this is going back to understanding uh, cultural and historical context. Sometimes, we wish that families are a little bit more engaged in the education of their children. And also, we wish that the families can be more expressive when it comes to the needs of their children. Because we find out, like, that families are maybe reluctant or do not engage at all in advocating for their children at school. And again, I view it from a historical and cultural context. My mom, when she used to take us to school during the first day of school, she will meet our teacher. She will tell the teacher that she has, these are my kids, and you have the right to discipline them if they do, of course, if they do anything wrong. And I entrust those children in you to do what you need to do to educate them, and I thank you for that. And that's can be the end of the relationship there, is my mom, giving us to that teacher, and the teacher is responsible fully of educating us. And in the United States, if you look at the relationship between parents and teachers, of course, the expectations are for teachers to be a little bit more engaged, for parents to be a little bit more engaged, to be participating in activities at school or committees, or be involved in the day-to-day, ultimately education of their children. And to many of the families that were resettled, that might not be something that they are accustomed to or used to, or it's part of their cultural understanding of the relationship between them and the school. The other thing too, as I mentioned earlier, is learning the rules of engagement here in the United States. And I feel and I encourage you to take every opportunity that you have to engage those students and their parents as a learning opportunity for yourself and also for the families that you are working with, because the system isn't new to them and they are not fully grasping how the system is operating yet. But without your explanation, that will continue to be the case in the future. But of course, with education, with potentially conversations, it could open up the opportunities for families to be able to engage more and understand that their voice is respected, that their voice is heard. I've heard from many families that their kids were denied education because they belong to a certain ethnic group, or they belong to a certain religion, or like other factors, or when they moved to a host country prior to coming to the United States, they were told that the boys maybe can access education but the girls cannot, or the opposite, because of capacity. And they had to accept that decision, and they had to live with that decision, that their kids cannot go to school because there are not enough schools, and the priority is for the children, of that country, rather than for the refugee children who are in that host country. So all of these components, taken consideration, should be taken in consideration as you learn about the families that you are working with, and understand how those historical and cultural contexts could influence their decision making today, and could influence how they engage or do not engage the school. Of course, for programs, I've worked with I worked with the school districts before, and they had either refugee centers, as example, or they had social workers, or they had individual volunteers that could potentially help families navigate the system, uh, on the school system, to be specific here, at a slower pace, at a pace that will be suitable for the family and also suitable for their learning style. Depends on which context they are coming from. And of course, if families can be paired with someone who can understand their language, who can understand their culture, that will be an added bonus to allow them to understand the system based on factual information, and also based on someone who walked the journey before them, and walked the same journey, and experienced the same experiences, experienced the same school system before them, so they can empower them, so they can encourage them, and also share information about what the potentials are. Because one thing that I will say, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know that you could go to the public library and borrow books or borrow resources, and that will be at no cost to you. And if this is something that you did not experience back home, you're not going to understand that it's, something that happened within the school system or within the community. Another way, thinking creatively about ways to engage families. And, one of the ways that come to mind is having potentially English classes. English classes within the school buildings that allow families to feel more safe, feel more comfortable, and also present opportunities to engage the parents uh, that are uh, parents of children in our schools, and in a structured environment where they are coming potentially twice a week or 3 times a week for English classes, at the same time engage them in the education of their children. Same thing with refugee centers that we have here in Lancaster, where they will help them navigate community appointments, navigate applications, navigate other family needs, while at the same time engaging them in opportunities within the school system that could benefit them as a family and also benefit the students within that family structure. Uh, any other questions that are presented in the chat, Megan?
No, everyone just agreeing with you and responding to your prompt. I think I've read everything. Just one affirmation that English classes with the children, especially older children, are very beneficial to engage families.
Wonderful, and thank you very much. And I wanted to touch point, of course, like continue to touch point on some of the prompts that I put on the screen. Language justice is about observation. Language justice is about how we can have our eyes open and how can we make sure that you know that we are engaging not only the students but celebrating their culture, celebrating their language, celebrating their identity. Because what I've seen with a lot of, especially like teenage kids, that they come into the United States and they want to fit in. They want to fit in and they want to be part of, they want to be part of the school body or like the student body within the school, and have a struggle where they are at home, as example, they will be Iraqi, and at school they will be an American. And this is something that I've saw a lot of kids struggle with. And with my children or with my conversations with parents in the community, I tell them that parents should encourage both. There is beauty in both cultures, and we should encourage our kids to be the healthy Iraqi American as an example that everyone will be proud of, and they will be a contributing part of like the community that they will live in. Because sometimes, kids struggle with that uh, identity, and they don't know what they are. If the kids are making fun of their accent at school, if they are making fun of their parents when they come to drop them off, whatever the case is, you see that child is struggling with like finding who they are. And by encouraging the multicultural aspect of it, through celebration in school or through engagement or through study or research, will normalize, some of those concepts and empower the students to be part of the school body and to be engaged in that conversation. And also for their parents to know that the school is talking about our culture. Maybe dad or mom can come on and present, to the community or to the students about the culture and different aspects of the culture. That could be another way of engaging families, but also promoting healthy healthy growth for the children that are being introduced to a new culture, a new system, a new language, and new everything. Now we're going to be shifting gears, and we spend the first half of the conversation talking about the cultural component. And now we're talking about interpretation and working with interpreters. Of course, whether it's written communication or whether it's verbal communication. I worked as an interpreter for many, many years, and I continue to be an interpreter. And sometimes I sit in meetings and I feel that the conversation, whether it's an IEP meeting or whether it's you know improvement plan or attendance improvement plan or any other plan that are being discussed with families, my suggestion to you and my recommendation to you is try to make sure that the language that is being used is as plain and as direct as it can be to ensure better communication, because families are less likely to ask clarifying questions if they don't understand or feel embarrassed or shy to ask those clarifying questions when the expectations are for them to understand what is being discussed with them. I've seen that with many, many families, whether they receive written communication at home, even in their home language, even if they receive the communication in Arabic, they will bring it to me and they will say, Amer, can you explain this to me? I don't understand what it means. And they are less likely to walk to the school and ask for a clarification if they don't have that relationship or that trust already built with the school. So my recommendation, the one recommendation that I will give to you is, and of course, as we go through the slides, we will talk about other tips as you engage with interpreters, is to make sure that you are using plain language in your written communication and also in your verbal communication. Because when I walked into IEP meetings, I saw 4 or 5 different individuals, teachers, counselors, therapists on one side, and the parent on the other side. And that can feel a little bit intimidating, for the parent to see that there are many people out there and they might not feel comfortable asking questions. But as you work with interpreter, it's very important that before you start the session, you always account for longer session when you're using an interpreter. It's going to take a little bit longer time because you're going the back and forth. And you want the family, you don't want to feel rushed. And also you want the family to feel that you are giving them the time that they need. So always account for longer time when you are using an interpreter. Uh, Introduce the people in the room, and making sure that before you start the session they know who the interpreter is and why they are in the room. They understand the role of every person that is involved in that meeting, to make sure that there is no assumptions are being made about why they are in the room. Is my child in trouble? Did my child do something that you know that I should be concerned about, etc., etc. So understanding those components is very important. And Allah, of course, if you have the time to brief the interpreter on background information, anything that will help the interpretation to run smoothly, and for the interpreter to be mentally and also from a vocabulary standpoint to be prepared, so they can share the information and they can be clear about what is being interpreted during the meeting. And always direct your conversation, or arrange seating to make sure that you are talking and speaking directly to the family. Yeah, and you are not talking to the interpreter. It can be a little bit tricky, but always direct your conversation as you are speaking to mother or father directly, and use the interpreter as assistant in communication rather the person that you are directing the question to, because you want the family and also the interpreter to know that This is, this is the flow of the conversation, and the decisions ultimately are left to you and the parents to decide on, not the interpreter. And during the session, of course, as we mentioned about, uh, you know, making sure that you are speaking directly, making sure that you are using naturally slower pace, using clear language, asking open-ended questions. On the open-ended questions, I will emphasize that because when you ask a yes and no question, there is a higher chance of misunderstanding versus when you ask open-ended questions, because open-ended questions will allow you to gauge understanding and will allow you to see if you need to shift the way that you're presenting the question to the family. And some concepts are new to families, some concepts are not understood. So using visuals when possible, asking them and inviting them to ask clarifying questions will be something that encouraged to allow them to feel that they are part of like this meeting, and also they are allowed to be part of the process, so they can help and also make decisions and support the students in whatever decision is being made during that conversation. And at the end of the session, again, like to reiterate what I was saying, earlier. Make sure that you summarize, make sure that you provide, opportunities for questions, and also, you know, provide them with feedback, or provide you with feedback as you engage the family. You could engage the interpreter after the session. You could ask them for feedback. You can say like, hey, now how did the session go? What did you think, like, the family, as example, understood everything that is being said? Are there any other ways, cultural or linguistic component, that I need to keep in mind in order for me to be able to present the information more clearly to families in the future, etc., etc. That will help you to build your capacity as a provider, and also allow you to have better communication style when working with families in the future. Are there any questions regarding working with interpreters? Any previous challenges or uh, uh, opportunities that you saw that helped you potentially engage families better, or uh, you know limited how you can engage families? Any thoughts when it comes to working with interpreters or working with families through an interpreter? And of course, Megan, I will lean on you to let me know if there are any comments or any questions there.
Absolutely. Nothing yet, but I will let you know.
Wonderful.
Jen shared that it can be even better when the interpreter can be on video. Smita said, we always brief the interpreter about the meeting prior, so they are invested in the meeting.
Absolutely. And yes, having, in-person interpreter when possible, uh, having the interpreter on video is always an added bonus, because it does allow and help with uh, more effective communication versus phone interpretation. Because the interpreter on the phone, if they don't have the full picture, if they cannot see everyone, if they cannot sense the room, the same thing for the family, being able to engage the interpreter, it can limit the communication a little bit. But definitely, I agree with that.
There is one question. Kelly wrote, there was one instance where a family didn't prefer to work with a certain interpreter because of the region or area he was from. Is this common in your experience?
This is a very I would say this is a very common, and thank you for mentioning that, because this is very common in many aspects, not only the interpretation. Again, we talked about historical and cultural context. I had many families that come and resettle here, and let's say that they were from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And I will resettle them here, and then I will introduce them to new families, but I see that they don't want to engage with that family, or someone who is a volunteer in the community, and we ask them to help a certain family, and you see that they are uh, politely denying or preferring not to engage that family, and only to find out later that because, when the conflict happened or the trauma happened, they were on the opposite side of the conflict. And unfortunately, even if they were not involved directly in that, but those could work as triggers for, for the families. And, we're not able to avoid all those triggers all the time, but like, of course, honoring the families and honoring their request, and understand that somebody, let's say me, could represent someone who oppressed them before, and they want to avoid having to be re-traumatized. And this is something that I've seen over and over many times when working with families.
There is one more question. Alexia asks, is the conversation documented, so transcribed or recorded and provided to both parties, meaning school staff and family?
If you have the ability, of course, like to have that and, send it to family, or helping them take notes, or helping them with a follow-up written communication. Because sometimes, like, I had families where they will come and they say, Amer, I need you to go with me to the school. And I'll ask them and inquire, why do you need me to go with the school? Well, we had a meeting the other day and they asked me things, but I don't remember what they asked me. So of course, if you have the ability to send a follow-up or give them even a follow-up or what is expected or what is needed from them, that will tremendously help families follow up on making sure that, the next steps are taken. Sometimes there is frustration from the schools because they will say, we agreed on XYZ during the meeting, but families did not follow up. And I will say, because sometimes families feel overwhelmed. Sometimes family have like information overload and they cannot remember all the things that you asked them or wanted from them after they leave the meeting. So if there is an opportunity to summarize at the end and also give written reminders or written prompts, that will be phenomenal, because that will ensure higher engagement, ensure higher follow-up, rather than leaving it to only verbal communication. So for the sake of time, of course, we will move it to the last question. And the last question will be, if you think about language justice, if you think about culture and language, on creating welcoming spaces for the clients that you work with, the question will be, what could language justice look like in our community work today? What does it look like today, and what you hope maybe for it to look like in the future? And with that questions, of course, we will be, ending the presentation, but we will be taking questions for the remaining of the time to hope to answer any other questions that you may have today.
There's nothing in the chat right now, Amer.
Wonderful. And are there any other comments or follow-up from the previous question? If there is anything that, of course, I did not answer yet, I will be more than happy to answer.
There is one question that is specific to Lancaster that I was going to connect you with afterward, if you'd like to. Yeah, speak
Absolutely.
with them
Yeah.
directly. Yeah,
Yeah, I will be more than happy.
I'll connect you after the after your session.
Yeah, I will be more than happy to connect with anyone if they have any questions. An hour is not enough to explain what language justice is about. It requires more time, requires a lot more to fully grasp the concept of language justice. But I hope that, with the time that we spent together, that I was able to introduce the concept of language justice to you and give you some things to think about for the future. But I'm always available if you need me, of course.
Great. Everyone is just thanking you for sharing your experience and your expertise.
You're welcome. So we're gonna advance to the next slide, which is how we, just to summarize what we spoke of, you know, early on, and building trust through community partnerships, making sure that your partners are true partners and are able to serve the clients that you're referring to them to. This is something that someone mentioned in the beginning, because you could refer someone to another agency, but if they are not equipped and if they are not able to serve them, then that will be detrimental to the trust and the relationship that you have with the family. So making sure that we are building true partnerships in the community and make sure that the partners understand how to serve the clients that we are all seeking to serve. Building internal capacity, make sure that your staff are trained, and also like you're potentially hiring people from those communities to make sure that the communities are reflected in the organization, because that will only allow you to serve clients better and allow you to serve families better when someone who represent them is part of the organization and can inform the internal decision making, and also help to be a bridge between the organization and the community, to create more inclusive systems. And be observant, allow yourself to learn and also to teach, and take those opportunities to engage the community. But you will have access to those slides. You have my phone number there, you have my email address there. I will be happy again, to engage you in questions, discussions in any way possible. But I thank you for your time today, and we have 4 more minutes. So if you have any last questions, we will take them, and I'm going to stop sharing right now.
Thanks, everyone. I put a link in the chat to our session evaluation. If you would like to receive Act 48 credit for this session, please go ahead and complete the evaluation, then you can apply for Act 48. Thank you all so much for being here. And yes, like Amer said, there's some time for questions. Kelly, I'm happy to read your question out loud, unless you wanted to unmute and ask as well. But Kelly asked, are there still programs in Lancaster to help families get to school appointments? And then she updated and said, the family can get to school for an appointment. They need a ride to get to work one day next week after the meeting. So I think Kelly's curious if there are programs in Lancaster that can support families who need transportation services.
Potentially depends on the context, and of course, ultimately, I can connect with Kelly and trying to understand a little bit more. But definitely there are programs. I would say depends on what the family is looking for, and if it's a one-time thing or if it's ongoing need. There are different resources available, and one of the things that there are volunteers, there are individuals that supported refugee resettlement, and because of refugee resettlement being reduced to ultimately nothing at this moment, those individuals are still eager to serve and eager to connect. So there is an opportunity to engage those individuals who provided transportation before to individuals in our community and be able, to continue to support the families that are in need. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me, so I can understand what the need is, and if there is a resource that I can directly to, I will be more than happy to do so.
Thank you. If anyone else has a question, please feel free to unmute and ask, or you can put it in the chat. Otherwise, we thank you, Amer, so much for your time. Thank you all so much for being here. And we will post this session recording as well as the slides on our Refugee Education Program website. I'll put the link back here again. So once everything is processed with the recording, we'll post it up there for you for your use. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks.
Right.
Thank you, Amer. Thank you, Amer, and thank you everybody for being here. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And Megan, if somebody ask for the email address, so feel free, of course,
put
to
it right
put
in
it in
there.
the chat, please. Yeah, wonderful.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you very much. Okay,
No problem.
great. Thank you
Thanks,
very much.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.